those of you who've been with us at SLIF, we typically don't do a lot of panels and discussions. We like to, spend the most part of the day with some provocative discussions or presentations, and then we put this in the afternoon. But really, it's an opportunity to reflect on some of the things that were discussed today. The last few years when we've done these discussions, it was really talking about the challenges of today. Because of course, coming out of the pandemic, that's only everyone in this room here could really focus on, was really trying to get through the next 2 years. What we're going to try to do today is talk about the next decade. So we entitled this Vision 2033. So this is the session we're going to look into a crystal ball and try to identify where the opportunities, where the challenges are. But I know we're going to get into some of the challenges of today because it's impossible not to do that. But I guess I just want to kick things off I guess by saying that this industry, like I said, has had a tough time really thinking to the future and doing that. Wendy, I guess I want to maybe start with you. In your organization, how do you go about looking, like when you're thinking 10 years out, where are the places that you do go to kind of maybe take a step aside and think about maybe where things are going on in your business? And do you find the opportunity to do that?
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you having me here today. And it's been a great session. And as everybody has commented on, this rug is fabulous. Except, it was
we're sitting on Cookie Monster's carcass. That's
well, actually, it looks like my 1970s living room, except it would have been orange or avocado green. So, well, we actually do have a crystal ball in Northbridge's home office. Now, the part of what we try and do, and actually it was interesting because you brought up COVID. Back the first quarter of 2020, we were like, this is the greatest thing. We're 95% occupied. Our margins are great. We're living large. This is the best thing since sliced bread. We are going to do Vision 2020. So when you said this was Vision 2033, I was like, oh God, please let that not happen again. Because we did this whole session on Vision 2020, right? So it speaks to what the gentleman said earlier about, Paul, what he said earlier about you just don't know what could possibly be coming forth. But one of the things that we did during COVID is we stopped and we said, okay, we're not going to lose sight of going forward, of looking forward. So we split our company into different groups. The immediate response team of COVID, and then the future looking, because we already had these initiatives that we wanted to deploy. And we didn't want to lose sight of that, even though we were in the middle of a crisis. Yep. So we were able to continue to move forward, to have a group that was moving forward while we had this other team that was focused on the day-to-day crisis. And I think that that's very important, not to lose sight of looking forward. It's very hard because everybody in this room that does what we do every day, it changes every day. There are demands on us every day. But we need to be thinking forward as an industry if we're going to be able to meet the demands of what, and when you said 2033, I said, oh my God, it's like putting a mirror up and going, oh my God, that's me.
Well, that was it. We had a conversation a few weeks ago, and you're saying, the reality is a lot of people in this room in 10 years from now could potentially be the market that you're going after.
So what do we want? What do we want? What are we going to be demanding? I know I have to have my, mocha latte in my lobby because I need that. I'm going to want those things, and we're going to want a lot of things. The biggest thing that we're going to want that hasn't changed over the 35 years I've been in this business is we want to connect with people. We want to be part of community. We want a sense of belonging. Yep. So those are the things that remain consistent. How we get those is what we need to talk about as an industry going forward.
Okay. And that's, as I mentioned earlier, the whole idea of SLIF, bringing together the not-for-profit, the for-profit, bringing the industry together to kind of have those conversations. When we launched it in 2015, and I was just saying, Kai was actually on the opening panel of that, and it's funny when I look back at how poor the video quality was. I look back at even some of the conversation at that point, it was wearables, this new thing, wearables. Everybody had the Fitbits and everything coming out, and that's not too long ago, and just to think about where things are going. But I guess just back to the point I was getting at, or I guess what I was getting into here is, it's really hard to think. We don't know what's coming, but it's also really hard as business leaders to focus on the future. So I'm just curious, maybe from your standpoint, Brenda, is there any things that you do to try to think ahead, or we can just be honest, it's impossible?
I don't think it's impossible. There was a period of time where it was impossible, definitely, because we were so focused on the here and now, but it feels really good to, I would say in the past year, be able to step back and really think about what challenges are before us, both as a company, but also as an industry as a whole, and really start to carve a strategy around where do we go from here and where do we want to see ourselves in 10 years. And for our team, certainly never leaving anyone behind. Within our organization for 27 years, we have communities that we've never sold. And so maybe it's unique, I don't know, but it's imperative for us that we continue to support our existing communities in the same manner. But how do we continue to evolve to meet the moment of what tomorrow's older adults and workforce are going to need? And so, our strategy consists of things like having a robust IT enhancement strategy, looking at our leadership development programming and assuring that that really prepares future executive directors who might be coming up through the organization to be prepared to step into a role, because we find some of our best community leaders come from within when they have really grabbed onto our values and our culture, and then they're able to share that by learning the skills of the executive director role. Certainly it's never been more important for us as operators to be at the table and be involved with legislative affairs and assuring that we're helping to shape some of the policy that's coming out. We have a lot coming at us, and it's important that we continue to be at the table in advocacy. And so that will certainly shape the future as well. And then, taking a look certainly at operational infrastructure. When we learn how companies have grown over time and how easy it is to just acquire, build, take on whatever is in front of us and not really focus intently on that operational infrastructure and assure that we're not outgrowing our quality. That's what we're focused on. The resources, the tools, and support have to be there for our next phase.
Yeah. So Kai, I guess quick, maybe if you can share with the audience who you're with now and kind of, and
sure.
obviously your background. For people that
So I've been lucky enough to be on both the operator side and the capital side. Operator over at Holiday and Eclipse, and then capital over at Health Peak, and now with Keppel Capital. So Keppel is an international conglomerate. We invest in healthcare across the world, and so that's what we do right now. Look, in terms of looking to the future, maybe I'll answer something both from an operator perspective and from the capital perspective. I think from an operator perspective, and I'm getting into like being an operator here, I think one thing that will probably change out of necessity is the 5% management fee. Okay, I think as I think as an operator right now, I think the question becomes, is 5%, does it actually make sense, right? And I think when you go through something like a COVID and you realize, hey, look, post-COVID, I need to do more in recruiting, right? What does that mean? I probably need to hire more recruiting people. Okay, what does that mean? That means I have to pay for it. So how does one pay for that, right? So is that cost sort of shared by the ownership groups as well? Yeah. So again, if you take a look at that, I think 5% is a little mute. If you look at hospitality, they charge a 2 or 3% management fee, but they also charge a booking fee, a accounting fee, a technical services fee, a brand fee. All added up together, it's 9 to 12%, right? So I think from a necessity standpoint, I think senior living operators need to take a look at, is 5% the right number? Gotcha. So that's from an operator perspective.
And you were in hospitality back in the day.
Yeah, so, that's right, yeah. And then from a capital standpoint, I think the thing that's going to change is because what's going on around us from a healthcare system, which is value-based care. Look, the biggest, folks who are looking at value-based care are the Humanas, the Aetnas of the world. I think if they start looking at, can I care for, Trever for less if he's in an assisted living community? They may someday say, look, why don't I go own assisted living community so I could capture all those savings myself? So, in 10 years, you could have, United being the largest, owner of senior living.
Is that your crystal ball?
I'm not saying it's a crystal ball, but I think if you follow the money, it could go in that direction.
So Trever, from your standpoint, from the REIT standpoint, when you look into the future, 10 years out, what's your crystal ball telling you?
Yeah, so I think it's really important for us. I mean, Kai kind of talked about capital side and operator side, and we used to describe it. It was, well, do you want to push the string or pull the string? Pull the string was the operator side, push the string was the capital side. I think for our perspective going forward is it's like inextricably linked together. I was in the military, I always draw parallels between like military and like my day-to-day. And for me now, it's like, I want to be in the foxhole with the operators and like shared mission, shared goal, you know, share what's going on, like what's good, what's bad. And I think having that high level of like going out and visiting communities, getting a lot of data from operators. I mean, we have 700 million data points. We're getting 200,000 a day. The more data points we can get, the more transparent our operators are, the more we can kind of share back with them. So we're doing that now through data science and our data science team and sharing a lot of insights that we see. I think going forward with AI, that'll become even easier and we can share things back even more quickly.
Yeah.
So that'll be a big opportunity.
Okay, so one thing I want to get into, and I shared this with everyone when we were planning this discussion. In the spring, we had a similar discussion, but of course we didn't have an owner or a capital provider on stage. But a lot of the conversation we're talking about looking at innovation and promoting that and doing things. Oftentimes it says, well, the owners and the operators are not aligned, or obviously the capital providers. I mean, Dwayne's presentation this morning kind of maybe talked about that a little. How would you respond to that? And how do you think things could be better?
I mean, Kai had mentioned the 5% management fee.
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
how about a 12% management fee over there?
Well, no,
There you go.
it's not about, it shouldn't be, how much are we
Are
paying?
we just going to agree to a 12% management fee?
Can we get that on the table now?
I think, look, it could be the operators that are making the investment, it could be the capital providers that are making the investment, but making sure that like you have full transparency and you're sharing the needs, I think that can go a really long way. I think probably some of the biggest opportunities going forward, I mean, we've talked a little bit about consolidation in the industry. That was kind of a big thing earlier this year. I think the barriers to entry for an operating company now are as low as they've ever been because a lot of the opportunity for innovation is on back office stuff, which may be a capital provider thing, it may be an operator thing, but stuff like the sales function, I mean, you could completely automate, in theory, a sales function. And that could be an investment that the capital provider makes or an investment that...
I was just going to say
Well, that was my next question. So obviously you guys invest in the real estate, but what are you, like from investing in the operations and things in innovation, what do you look for? Like when you're looking, even maybe being here, if you walk through and you see some of the new technologies that are out there, do you feel that moving forward that maybe that's something that you guys could be looking into more in terms of investing?
Traditionally, it was always easiest for us to make more of a real estate type investment, just from our perspective. One thing that I always like to ask is how does the customer value this? Because if the customer values it and you can assign some value on that, then you have kind of the start of an underwriting model, so that certainly always helps. But anything that I think now can kind of optimize the business, optimize the back office, I think that's kind of the first frontier.
So I just want to bring it back and we'll move on to other things. But Kai, from the capital standpoint, again, since you've been an operator and you've been on different sides.
Yeah.
Recently, capital maybe gets a bit of a bad rap. What do you think things that could be improved kind of moving forward to kind of align?
Well, look, I think a lot of stuff that Trevor's talking about makes perfect sense. I mean, being there and understanding what's going on. Look, for us, so Keppel owns half of Watermark, and the reason to do that is because we understand that the value of the real estate is driven by the operator. Bad operator, bad value, right? So by investing in half the operator, it allows us to inject capital into that operator if we think it needs some improvements, right? Because money does not grow on trees, especially in today's world, of course, right? So finding the capital to do that investment for an operator is pretty essential now, and I think that kind of alignment certainly helps. But getting to your first question though, in terms of what are the obstacles for innovation for some operators? One, it's capital, but two, I think a lot of operators need to sort of take a hard look at themselves and say, do I have people on staff? Okay, not just at the community level, but at the executive level, who actually understand what guys like Paul are talking about, right? If I ask most operators right now, do you have a chief information officer or chief tech officer? The answer is very low. They may have a director of technology. And if you start talking to him or her, they're talking about hardware, not software.
Yeah.
So part of it is, is the talent that understands, technology or information and data technology out there. Is that in the space today? So I think as we continue to mature, we'll have more of that insight and talent into the space.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. Northbridge is an owner-operator, so we have our own fund. So we're on both sides. And not only that, but we have an advisory business where we work with private equity and with REITs, in between the operator from an operational asset management standpoint. So because we have both those skill sets and that knowledge, we're able to do things like assess whether, the cost-benefit analysis of being able to bring in a technology. And you're absolutely right. From a consumer perspective, does it make sense? But also, as you just said, does it make sense from an adoption standpoint? Do you have the staff? Because technology is only as good as the people who are utilizing it, right? And so you have to have that staff in order to initiate and in order to make full use of whatever that technology is.
Do you feel overall, though, that as an industry, that this industry should be having more people in those roles and more executive roles to have a better understanding of technology compared to others?
Get a lot of tech vendors coming through and trying to sell their stuff. Here's what I would say, and I actually told this to people before. Instead of coming into my office, the guy with the hoodie, trying to sell me on their Series A, sort of funding. Look, spend some time at a community for a week or two. And then try to solve for a problem that really is a problem. Don't try to sell me a solution that really isn't a problem today. I think that would go a long way, because I'm not sure if technology is actually providing us what we really need to provide the better results we're trying to get to. So having a forum, I would suggest, whether it be an Argentum or an NIC, having a forum so that technology can go to them and maybe do a bit of a Shark Tank where they can share, this is what we're thinking of, what do you guys think as operators? I think that sort of back and forth, forum would be beneficial.
Yeah. Wendy, I recall you said something we spoke a few weeks back about there's a lot of great technologies out there that can obviously deal with fall prevention, detection, but you said you also want to make sure that you're investing in things that are social and interactive, like getting people to get up and dance. They're going to help them with their stability as opposed to just relying on the technology from preventing. I thought that was a good response.
Exactly, movement and and connection, very important.
And the connection, yeah.
And that involves the human factor, right? And our business is all about the human factor. So the key with bringing technologies in is what is going to help us do that better or have more time to have that human connection, right? That's where the technology plays a role. And I realize that as we're looking towards the future, from a workforce development standpoint, today, in the next 5 years, we're 1.2 million caregivers short. They're not out there, right? So what are we going to be doing to help support that? Whether it's, and you talked about legislation, whether it's better immigration reform and all of those types of things, we as an industry need to step up and make sure, and some of the, we just talked about, solve the problem, like the CMS issue, right? Like, really, is that solving that? We're gonna do mandatory staffing on a national level when we don't have nurses to fill positions? I just don't, that's the problem. Let's deal with the problem, not some other, crazy suggestion.
And I think with technology, you mentioned about a lot of the limiters. There's limiters even just within our aging buildings that they're not ready. The infrastructure is just not there. So there's a huge investment that goes into the buildings, even just to get them to a place where this technology does something more than just getting a spinning wheel. So I completely hear what you're saying with the human element side. I strongly believe that technology needs to take the place of things that it doesn't take a human to do. And so, for us, we have robots in our dining rooms. And I know that that's not even an innovative thing anymore. People did that out of necessity, but it truly has been a game changer when we can't find servers. And we'll probably end up having robots doing floor care and other things too. That technology exists today. It actually seems really archaic compared to what we just viewed in this AI presentation and what's coming. But we have to get much more sophisticated about how we use the human capital that we have right now, because we won't have an endless supply. And therefore, what technology can pick up is really what we need to embrace.
I want to jump onto healthcare alignment, but Trever, I failed to mention you wrote an insightful piece in the Nick newsletter a few months back about your I guess, approach on active ownership. Do you want to just kind of share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, active ownership, and I hit on this a little bit before, but it's really, if you look at the history of REITs, look at us, for example, in terms of operators we've had under management contract structure. 8 years ago, we had 3, 4 years ago, we had 11, and now we have 23. And all of those agreements, you have a lot more alignment in us as a REIT as bottom line P&L exposure. And so it just means that we're going to be so much more ingrained in operations and want to drive that performance. And so it naturally is going to lead to us want to have more conversations, want to innovate together more than kind of a us versus them approach that you might have seen years ago. Yeah. But it's also a lot of data sharing back and forth, which I touched on earlier, that I think is really important.
So there's been a lot of consolidation. We hit on this at the spring event, and operators, buildings trading owners. Is there anything different now that you look at when you're looking for operating partners that may have changed over the last, say, even pre-pandemic? That's much different.
I think for us, having an operating partner that critically thinks is a great idea generator, has a great culture. I mentioned before that the barriers to entry to a new operating company is lower now because of AI, also because you could do kind of fractional management for back office and this thing and that thing. But you need to have a strong internal culture and strong leaders to kind of bring all those things together. One thing that I think new technology really helps is it kind of democratizes, and it can democratize back office functions. And so the biggest operators kind of lose a little bit of their economy of scale advantages when, I kind of referenced the sales funnel before. If you can have a chatbot that's there 24/7, you don't need a call center anymore. Yeah. That's pretty powerful.
All right, so just changing topics, when I had individual conversations with each of you, Brenda, you and I spoke a few weeks back, and the thing that you said, that the path forward for senior housing is the connection between senior housing and healthcare. And the first thing I thought, I said, Murray Mercier from Point Click Care paid you to say that. But no, honestly, what are your thoughts around that? And obviously we've discussed this over the years, but from your viewpoint.
Listen, it's a part of the path forward, certainly. I think for a long time, senior living has been kind of on the outskirts of what's happened with hospitals and skilleds and home health and everybody else that was in the bubble. And we were kind of on the outskirts, and maybe they'll discharge to us, and could we do it better? I don't know. We don't have a choice anymore but to insert ourselves. When you think about the number of older adults that are aging into the demographic that we serve, hospitals are overwhelmed, skilled nursing has its own sets of challenges. We have to be a part of the solution. And not only do we have to be a part of the solution, we need to be able to take credit for the high quality of care and service that we offer. And in partnering with payers, and I know Kai mentioned about, United may own communities. They may. Frankly, I don't think United's going to operate better than we do, better than and I've seen that happen where hospital systems and payers try to step in, and no offense to any of them if they're here, but they don't know our business and they really struggle. So if we're prepared to step forward and fill that gap, if we can embrace transparency in data sharing and not be afraid of what might be found, if we can put quality at the forefront and assure that our outcomes match any other level of living, because let's face it, people living in our communities today, many of them were skilled nursing of yesterday. So we absolutely need to be a part of that equation. And there's a lot of different avenues to go about it. And we're at the very, very early stages of commitment to this at the Springs. But whatever pathway is right for you, I guess from my view, there is no one better than to care navigate around the lives that are in our building that we're responsible for than us. Mm-hmm. And I just want to make sure that as an industry, we take a hard look at who's doing it currently and who's doing it well. There's many that are, and learn from that and see if there's a path forward for us to have a seat at the table within that healthcare ecosystem.
Yep. Wendy, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. The spectrum of senior living is so huge, right? So you have everything from independent living to long-term care. And so when I do look, and I look historically, when I first started in this business, and hospitals were pushing down into nursing homes, and nursing homes no longer became long-term care facilities. They were more of a subacute rehab, coming out of the hospital. And now we're seeing the nursing homes, pushing into assisted living. And so I think it's inevitable that we're going to have to become more of a healthcare focused. I think there are a lot of things, like you were talking about with the value-based care and reaching out. 30 years ago when I started in this business, 3 of my first projects were joint ventures with hospitals, right? So they were joint venture communities with hospitals. What happens with hospitals when they expand and contract? So the idea of having specialty is important. We know what we're doing in senior living. They know what they're doing in acute care hospital. So by joining forces instead of becoming all things to one person, yep, I think is what's going to be key in the future. And I know that hospitals are looking at hospital at home now because of the overcrowding in hospitals. So wouldn't it be great to be able to have, and I know that a few of our hospitals in our area are doing this, where they're taking, 6 beds at a rehab center, and they're utilizing those beds instead of in the hospital. Is that going to happen in senior living? I think so. I think it's a better outcome for the resident, and it's obviously less expensive for the hospital, less expensive for insurers. I think it works all around.
Yeah. Okay.
It's interesting as you think about the panel that was right before this. I just wonder, if senior living providers do provide more care for folks that are coming out of the hospital, is there a role for Gen AI to play in that? So when someone's walking into the room, they say, this person got out of the hospital, how do I best care for that person? And then it can source from medical records, history of treating for patients of that kind, and it says, here's the 5 things you need to do in this room, and here's how long you should do it.
There's a gentleman out there that has that technology. I met him last night.
I think it exists.
Show a hand for that person. Uh-oh, they missed the opportunity to talk. That's what happens. That's why the vendors should always be in the room. The smart ones come in. We don't have a lot of time, but of course, we can't talk about a lot of things unless we talk about labor. So obviously you said immigration reform. But we're going to have a discussion tomorrow, which will talk us more about the frontline workers that Charles Stern will be leading a discussion on. But future leaders, right? A lot of people in the room here will be retiring in the next 10 years. And are there things that you're doing now to also, I think you had a good way to say it, like also not give a hand up, but give a hand up to people on the teams and step into more senior roles and grow future leaders and bring people, kind of like Dwayne was saying this morning, bring people from outside the industry into the industry. Any programs or anything that you guys are doing or?
Yeah, I would say, succession planning is very important. And you can see in this room and throughout the industry, there is a big gap between those of us who are older and the next generation. Mm-hmm. I think that one of the things that we've done successfully is we do grow from within, from every aspect, every level. 70% of our executive directors were in another role within our community. And our average length of employment is 10 years, which is absolutely unheard of. And The reason for that is because we do provide the pathways for growth, whether it be a housekeeper to a PSA, to a CNA, to a nurse, to a dishwasher, to a chef, to a business office manager, to an executive director. We need to build those people from within our organization, and then going outward, we need to make sure that we're screaming loud and proud that this is a wonderful business to be in. It's rewarding, and we are just on the cusp of an explosion of what it's going to be, given the fact that all of us, baby boomers, are going to be, in need, we're the, whatever it is, the golf ball, going down the snake, we're going to need and want all sorts of different products, services, living, lifestyle, you name it. So for people coming out of school, this is a wonderful, absolutely wonderful industry to be getting into. So we engage with universities, with high schools, with Vogue schools. We're constantly talking and bringing people in and doing internships and so forth. Very, very important for this industry.
And are you finding success doing that? Because I know
Yes.
you can say this is a great industry, but are the younger people feeling that way?
So it's interesting. We do this program where we bring in, 20 graduates from a local college, for instance, and I'll always say at the beginning of the day, I'm like, okay, how many of you are interested in getting into senior living? It'll be like 3, right? Okay, what are you guys interested in? Oh, I want to get into childhood. I go, my goal is by the end of today that 3 will double. There'll be at least 6 of you, and then I've done my job.
Yeah.
And I actually have 2 people from that, this was years ago, that are still with the organization today.
Okay.
And it's pick and shovel work, but it will make a difference if we all do it and we all sing the same song.
Just looking again on time here, Dan Madsen unfortunately had to cancel. He was going to be on this discussion, and one of the things that he wanted to talk about was the opportunities internationally. Kind of looking at, talking about challenges, but also looking ahead and thinking of that, obviously, with leisure care, in the UK and doing things in Mexico. Kai, you guys are doing things. What do you think are some more opportunities? Do you see anything out there where there's maturing markets that there's going to be maybe a boom, or is it not?
So this silver tsunami, as people call it all the time, it's happening in the U.S., it's happening in China, it's happening in Europe, it's happening around the world right now. So is there a demand for senior living across the world? The answer is yes. We, Keppel, so we have our first community opening in China next month. We got like 14 other projects following suit. We're looking at investments in the UK. I think the UK is a very interesting place right now. If you look at all the stock inventory in the UK, only 35% of it has an ensuite. Okay. That means the bathrooms are pretty much shared, right? Like, who wants to live in that kind of environment? So, look, I think, the demand in terms of the population, changes are certainly there. And I think, the product demand is going to be there too. So, yeah, we're really heavy on global investment.
Okay, interesting. We actually hired a consultancy to research the potential of bringing a SLIF, like a pan-European event. And of course, all the different countries is not the same, but even the UK, it just feels like it's not a developed enough market of senior housing compared to here. But it's, of course, going to get there with the way that...
If you're an investor, if you could invest in the US 15 years ago, I think you did do pretty well, right? So look, I would say if you're trying to, if some good returns are something that you're trying to circle, then I think Europe and the UK is probably somewhere you should take a look at right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of things there. So to wrap things up, I guess go down the panel here, just kind of ask a couple of quick questions. So we'll try to keep the answers a little concise.
Yep.
So the first one I'm going to ask is, what are you most optimistic about when you think the next 10 years? What do you, Trever, this doesn't have to be speaking, I know, on behalf of your company, but in terms of you, what do you think when you look at this industry that you feel that you're most optimistic about?
This is maybe classic, but demand fundamentals. I mean, the 5 years come out of the great financial crisis. 80-plus population was growing 7% per year. Now it's growing 24%. So I think that plus supply-demand, supply is at its lowest level since 2011. I think we just can't forget how exciting that is.
Okay. How about you, Brenda?
On top of the demand, I guess I continue to be just so encouraged by the industry as a whole and the professionals that make up this incredible group that's trying to evolve and move senior living forward. And I think that the level of commitment to the mission that is the work that we do is going to carry us far if we can continue to work together.
Totally agree with that. I think what I'm most excited about is that the passion hasn't really died down for those people who have been and are in this business and in it for the right reasons. The passion for what we do in making difference in people's lives is so rewarding. I mean, I started out in residential real estate development back in the 80s, and it was a great time. We making lots of money and so forth. It pales in comparison to what we're doing and how we're making a difference in people's lives. That's what gets me jazzed.
And I can say I see that firsthand because we produce events in 10 different sectors and all real estate focused, and nothing compared to the passion of the people in this room. So, yeah. And so what about you? What are you most
with a capital hat on, I think Trevor's answer spot on. And from an operator hat on, I think,
so a lot of great opportunities. All right, so the last one is, what are the things that you're so tired of talking about at conferences? And you could say anything, I can take it. What are you tired of talking about? I mean, because I feel like, listen, you come back to conferences year after year and people kind of, a lot of times, talking about the same thing. So what pisses you off, Trever, about conferences?
Why don't we start with Kai?
No, he just answered the last question.
I'll go. You want me to go?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. It's not a huge level of frustration. It's more, I think somebody is truly continuing to put sessions on agendas waiting for a person to come up and just give an easy button to solve the workforce issue. There is no easy button for it, and I think we all come with pad and pen in hand waiting for this to just be solved by somebody's wonderful session. And truly, it's a grind, and it's a number of factors to make it better, certainly focused on relationships and culture, but that's one, it's just one I see.
I like that. I appreciate that one, because we ask everyone when they register, what are 1 or 2 topics you want to see discussed? If there's one discussion, what's top of mind? 85% of the people say labor, staffing, retention, and we go out and say, all right, we got to find some innovative things to put on stage, but that's it. There's really nothing. We can get some consultant to come in and talk about culture or that, but you can't solve that in a 1-hour presentation. It's just better the opportunity to kind of get into a discussion and solve things. So.
It's basic blocking and tackling, right? It's that type of thing. I would say that I agree with the sort of, like, I've got the next greatest thing, right? One of the things that, I think that and Kai brought it up earlier, I would love to use a portion of some of these conferences to really talk through, especially when we're talking about vendors and technology and operators, really talk through, like, what is the problem? Like, what are the problems that we're having to deal with in the industry? And let's talk about, like, what type of technology or solution or service or whatever it is could we together create and develop? I think that would be a really interesting thing to
You put on the agenda in the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd like that one.
Look, I probably go to some different conferences these days.
Yeah.
Look, I was out at a investor conference out in the UK, and the question I get asked a lot from outside investors is, when is the labor force going to come back? Because of COVID.
Yeah.
And this is probably where I put on my operator hat and say, guys, look, I don't think you understand. When you work at a community, residents become second family, right? You know them, you know their kids, you know their grandkids, you get to know them that way. So I think the best answer to your question is, how long does it take for you to recover from when a member of your family passes away, right? Because that's a tough thing to overcome. Some people, they heal faster than others. Yeah. It's just, different people are different ways. And I think that's the one part that I think, I wish that there was a better bridge, from operators to capital. Just, the 23-year-old kid who's writing his Excel model probably doesn't get that part.
Of course.
Right? And, and I think, again, I would say the best thing for capital to do what Trevor's, was saying is go visit some communities. Get to know the residents, get to know the associates. You'll get to know the business much better, and you won't have to ask that silly question again.
All right, that's a great answer.
Yeah.
Love that.
Trever, you had some time to think about what pisses you off.
I'll just hit on one thing that we don't talk about enough, which is we hit a little bit on labor before, and one thing that we collect an awful lot of, we put this in our management contracts, is what's the diversity, ethnicity, and inclusion of your labor force. And we're, we can't really make operational decisions, but we can give people insights. And so we take as much of that as we can and just try to tell people, like, hey, here's what you've got. Let's talk about your goals. Here's how you benchmarked others. And I just don't hear a lot of that conversation. So I think that's probably big.
All right, so there's some suggestions for future discussion topics. Well, listen, we're out of time here. I know it's one of these discussions where it's like, we just talked about a bunch of different things. Hopefully there was some interesting dialogue here for you guys. But thank you so much for agreeing to participate in this. And